What is meta-analysis, and why should HR professionals care? There are many results from academic research that can be useful for human resources professionals. The validity of different employee selection methods, the importance, or not, of various facets of employee engagement, or the factors that influence how employees react to merit-based pay, just to name a few. But the academic research literature can be overwhelming, with numerous journals and many studies, in some cases, literally thousands of studies on the same topic. Luckily, if someone searches the academic literature, they are likely to run into academic articles with the word meta-analysis in the title. By integrating previous research, a meta-analysis article is a type of review article that summarizes the research on a particular topic. But whereas traditional review articles are qualitative, that is, they reflect an author's personal assessment of the previous research, meta-analyses are quantitative review articles, that is, they apply statistical procedures to analyze previous research. Meta, in this case, means at a higher level. So a higher level of analysis equals meta-analysis. Transcendent, if you will. But in more earthly terms, an analysis of existing analyses. Meta-analytic articles can be quite useful for HR professionals. When there are multiple research studies on one topic, a meta-analysis can provide one-stop shopping for the end user because a meta-analysis brings together a review of many studies all in one place. So this is often a better place to get a more accurate understanding of a topic of interest than by just finding one or two individual research articles. A meta-analysis is also a great place to see if context matters for a particular result. If one study focuses on the correlation between extroversion and counterproductive behaviors in a call center, this doesn't reveal whether the same correlation is also found in jobs with high degrees of autonomy. But a meta-analysis can bring together studies of extroversion and counterproductive behaviors that were done in different contexts to see if the correlation depends on factors such as job autonomy. The degree to which a particular relationship is broadly universal or contingent upon context is important for HR professionals to understand before applying the research to their own organizations. Suppose we are interested in the relationship between meaningful work and job satisfaction. More specifically, what's the correlation between these two constructs? In a traditional research project, a researcher would identify a research site, administer a survey, and analyze the results, which would include an estimate of the correlation between meaningful work and job satisfaction. Suppose one research team uses a sample of 1,000 people from Mechanical Turk, finds a correlation of 0.87, and publishes this study. A different research team surveys 300 workers in a particular city, finds a correlation of 0.54, and publishes this in a different journal. A third research team has access to employees in a specific company and finds a correlation of 0.69. Over time, research accumulates that finds different values of the correlation between meaningful work and job satisfaction, all based on different samples with potentially different characteristics. Meta-analysis provides a rigorous way to summarize and analyze these diverse studies. To conduct a meta-analysis, a researcher scours the published and unpublished research literature for studies that all report a correlation value for the variables of interest. In other words, the meta-analysis researcher assembles a data set where each entry, that is, each observation, is itself a research study, and the key variable of interest is the correlation value reported in that study. Continuing with the example of meaningful work and job satisfaction, the first entry in the data set could be the study of 1,000 Mechanical Turk workers, the second entry the study of 300 workers, and so forth. Understanding this data structure is a key to understanding meta-analysis. In some respects, the data set is like any other data set. It has observations, key variables of interest, such as the correlation between meaningful work and job satisfaction, and other variables that can be analyzed. And the data can be analyzed like any other data. You can construct summary statistics, estimate regression models, and the like. If it's helpful to think of the data in a spreadsheet, then in a traditional data set, the rows would be individual observations, such as individual people, and the columns would be measures about that observation, such as a person's job satisfaction score and their age. In a meta-analysis dataset, each row represents a different underlying research study, and the columns are measures of these studies, such as the correlation found in that study and the sample size in that study. You can analyze the meta-analysis spreadsheet using the same statistical methods you would use for a more traditional dataset. But remember that a meta-analysis dataset is unique in that each observation represents a research study. So again, the key variable of interest is itself a correlation. And to do summary statistics means that you are finding the mean and standard deviation of a correlation. Because there is now, in effect, a sample of correlations, you can calculate a confidence interval for the true correlation. As this is based on a number of research studies, this should be a better estimate of the true correlation than what's found in any one study. This is how a meta-analysis can be very valuable for HR professionals. Moreover, while a typical dataset might include other characteristics of a particular observation, for example, a person's age or gender, in a meta-analysis dataset, these other characteristics are characteristics of the study captured by that particular observation. For example, the sample size of that study, whether the study included specific controls like age or education, whether the study used self-reported measures, whether the study is published or unpublished, and the like. In this way, one can also analyze whether the correlation found in the research literature might systematically differ because of different research settings or other characteristics of the research. In other words, you can analyze this dataset in similar ways to how you might analyze a typical dataset. What's key is remembering that the data represent a collection of research studies, and then interpret your results accordingly. For example, suppose you find that the average of your key variable is lower for studies focused on service occupations. This means that the average of the correlations found in service occupations is lower than the average of the correlations found in other sectors. Gaining insights into the potential importance of contextual differences is another way in which meta-analysis can be useful for HR professionals. There are also statistical methods that are used specifically for meta-analyses. Those are beyond the scope of this introductory animation, but here's a quick cheat sheet of the important things you are likely to see in a meta-analysis article. Effect size. That's just another term for correlation. Confidence interval? That's the confidence interval for the effect size, that is, for the overall correlation, just like any other type of confidence interval you might be familiar with. K, that's typically used to represent the number of studies in the meta-analysis, in other words, the rows in your dataset. N, that's the total sample size of the underlying studies when you pool all of the subjects together. Combine this with an understanding of what the dataset represents, again, a collection of traditional research studies, and that's all you need to start to understand meta-analysis. So if you want to see what the research literature says about the relationship between key quantities in HR, a meta-analysis article can provide one-stop shopping with many studies summarized in a single place.